MMA fans around the world have been waiting for a Dana White announcement for UFC 300 for the past longer than that, 24 hours since Dana White bailed on us last night. And the big UFC 300 announcement he had for us fans, get this, guys. It's Zhang Weili versus Yan Yan. Are you fucking kidding me, Dana White? I'm just holding myself back from screaming into a bag to try to alleviate the sound, to lessen the damage that the sound would do to my surroundings and the people that are in this vicinity. You're making Zhang Weili versus Yan Yan for UFC 300. Let me get this right. The most monumental card that there's ever been. Okay, you've had a whole year to prepare for this, to discuss this. The fights that should be on UFC 300, first and foremost, it should be about entertainment. Not just the status quo, formal title fights. All right, Zhang Weili versus Yan Yan. It's a good fight. It's the fight to make. Should have been Zhang Weili versus Alexa Grasso. That still shouldn't have been on the main card of UFC 300. Zhang Weili versus Yan Yan should be in China. That's where it should be. That's how you make it a big fight. Two Chinese women fighting for the UFC belt. That's never been done before. That's a big opportunity to build the sport in Asia, in China. You're putting it in Las Vegas? You could have saved this fight for the cards after UFC 300, the ones that will inevitably not be that stacked, that are going to need some good title fights. This is a status quo formal matchup. It should not be on the main card of UFC 300, one of the biggest cards that there's ever been. It's not one of the biggest cards that there's ever been at this point. It's a regular-ass shitty title fight, for God's sake. Let's not act like it isn't. All right? You're going to say, oh, you're hating so much. Zhang Weili versus Yan Yan. It's a massive... You're telling me Yan Yan is UFC 300 worthy? Are you out of your mind? Aren't you trying to make sales? Don't you want people to actually buy the pay-per-view? UFC 300 should be an opportunity because for a casual fan, it just sounds like a cool name, UFC 300. That should be the opportunity to get more eyes on the sport. You think that this fight, Yan Yan and Zhang Weili, is going to make casual fans tune in? Come on, man. This is just simple business. This fight doesn't add anything to the card. It just deters people from buying it, okay? You want to have 5 fights that are undeniably awesome. Undeniably awesome. That are so good that people have to watch. This ain't it. The biggest issue here, once again, guys, because I know it's going to sound like I'm just hating, the UFC had 99 main card opportunities, pay-per-views, 99 pay-per-views to make formal title fights. Just the regular title fights that just have to happen because, we want to be going based on merit most of the time, and I get it. 99 cards, they had the opportunity to do that leading up to 300. 300 should be about the best fights, the most entertaining matchups, with the biggest names that bring it every single time. I'd rather see 5 non-title fights on UFC 300 with big names, exciting fighters, knowing we're going to get amazing fights, than these formal title matchups, man. Again, they're going to have 99 more opportunities starting at 301 all the way up until UFC 400 to put on cards with a title fight like Yan Yan and Zhang Weili. And I like that fight, but the fact that it's on 300 is a fucking joke. UFC 300 should sell over 1 million pay-per-views. You don't need Conor McGregor. You just need to think a little bit. Okay? Congrats. Now you have a card that's going to sell the old measly 600,000. Rakic isn't a star. Bilal ain't a fucking star. Yan Yan and Zhang Weili, they're not pay-per-view draws. This may not even sell 500K. You had one job. Just put together 5 good fights on the main card. Charles Oliveira. Wow. Charles and Arman is the biggest fight out of the 4 you've announced for the main card so far. That's not a big issue. But there should be 4 other fights that are level with Charles Oliveira, that are on par with it. Like, do the matchmakers think when they're making this fight? Do they understand that UFC 300 is supposed to be the biggest card ever and that Yan Nan has no place on it? No disrespect to her. Again, this is the fight to make if Alexa Grasso is not fighting Zhang Weili. It is. It's just a regular-ass title fight. This is not a big matchup. It could be if you give it its own spotlight. It's going to get shit on by the other fights, man. If Alex Pereira ends up being on this card, that's going to put a shadow over it. Leon and Bilal is going to put a shadow on it. This is a fight that's big for Chinese MMA. Put this in China, or at least let it main event its own card. Unbelievable, man. The problem I have with Yuri versus Rakic, by the way, is the fact that Rakic isn't an entertaining fighter. Break the rules once for UFC 300. Don't just give us regular, decent fights. This is not just about there being a belt on the line. I'm more excited for 5 of the fights on UFC 299 than I am for this. More than that. Peter Yan and Song Yadong, there's no belt on the line. Okay? It's still a better fight than Zhang Weili versus Yan Nan. And if you're telling me otherwise, you're just coping. You don't actually believe that. Okay? Robert Whittaker. Poor Robert Whittaker. Paulo Costa's probably going to pull out of that fight. He said he hasn't even signed the contract yet. Whittaker's going to have to go through a whole training camp. The UFC should be pulling the plug on the Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa fight. They should be listening intently to every Paulo Costa interview just to make sure he's not uttering the words, "I haven't seen a contract yet." They're complacent. They don't care. They're not thinking. They're not planning accordingly. They should have done Whittaker Usman on this card, man. Come on. You have a roster with 500 guys. 50 of them are big names. And you're getting Yan Nan on the fucking main card for UFC 300? Is this some kind of a joke? This, as far as I'm concerned, is just a regular, decent pay-per-view. And that's the big issue here. UFC 300 should not just be a good pay-per-view. It should be recognizably better than anything we've ever seen. We've been talking about UFC 300, right? You think of Joe Rogan doing the drum sound. Dun, dun, dun. Thinking about Brock Lesnar and John Jones. All the big legends. Conor McGregor. Yan Nan? UFC 299's better than it? Oh my gosh. Man, cut this shit out. This is why the UFC needs to hire matchmakers like me that aren't living under a rock, that are actually passionate about the sport, that know what the fans want. I don't give a fuck if there's some shiny belt on the line. That in and of itself does not make the fight better than a million other matchups that you can make. Okay? Rod Tang versus Demetrius Johnson's a better fight than this. Doesn't need to be a belt on the line for the mixed rule set. All right, I'm just going to name a bunch of fights. Yuri Prochazka versus Jan Blachowicz would be a better fight to make than the Rakic one. Yair Rodriguez and Calvin Kattar would be better than Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. You should have done Aljamain Sterling and Brian Ortega. 2 good fights rather than 1 mediocre one. Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage. Come on. The first issue is that it's not competitive, and why are we watching? You may as well just have a hobo fight Francis Ngannou at that point. Cody Brundage does not deserve to be on UFC 300. It's not that hard, and that's my complaint. The UFC, it's so easy to switch this. It's like brushing your teeth, man. It's really not that hard to just make the right fights. It's not hard to realize that Yan Nan and Zhang Weili should be on its own card or should be in China. It's not hard to realize that maybe you should hold off with that fight and just do Grasso versus Zhang first. Come on, man. Do better than this. This is ridiculous. We waited all night for this. I'm fucking sick and tired of this shit. Okay? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Once again, it's because the UFC could do better, and it's not hard for them to do that. Okay? It's not hard. It just takes a little bit of effort, and you got to be in tune with what the fans want. Who are the matchmakers? What are these guys like? In their 60s, in their 50s? Come on. Get on board. It's time. I can't understand how they fuck up this much. Okay? Like, it's really crazy to me. It's not hard to understand that this is not a good fight for UFC 300. This card is no different than 10 other pay-per-views that we've had. I can name 10, 15 other pay-per-views that were this good. UFC 295 was basically this good. Okay? Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka, incredible fight. Entertaining matchup. You have Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich, two heavyweights in their prime. Two of the most dangerous and most entertaining fighters on the roster going at it, again, in their prime. That's an amazing fight. Benoit St. Denis was on the card. Okay, you guys are going to say I'm glazing just for mentioning him. Diego Lopez was on the card. That card is better than this. It's not all about title fights, man. It's not all about title fights. Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan's a good fight, but, you know, there's literally one entertaining fight on this main card so far because Yuri and Rakic has potential to be a shit fight, has potential to be a stinker. Leon versus Bilal. Leon Edwards has one of the most boring fight styles in the game. Bilal Muhammad doesn't have the most fireworks fight style. There's a chance it's a little bit of a slow fight. It may be technical, it may be fun to watch live, but come on, UFC 300 should be special. You should be bringing out the big guns for this. Only entertaining matchups. That's the first and foremost. Then it should be big and exciting names. Come on. This is bullshit. Yan Zhao should not be on the main card for UFC 300. Terrible fight. Dana White made us wait a whole day and night for this announcement. He didn't even have the main event ready. And let me guess, the main event's going to be something non-competitive like Pereira and Aspinall. Pereira and Jamal Hill, great main event. Aspinall Jones, not going to happen, obviously, but that would be a great main event. Jones is still injured. Who knows what the main event's going to be, dude, but it's probably just going to be a one-sided fight. Oh, big name, Stipe Miocic. Big name, Stipe Miocic coming back to fight Aspinall. Oh, wow. We're going to see Aspinall lay him out in the first round. How special. UFC probably won't make that because they're waiting for the Jones matchup. But you guys get my point. This is going to be a disappointing card. I'm right. I was right from the get-go. I knew they were going to fuck up with this. UFC 299 is without a doubt the best card we've ever had. Of course, we'll see how it plays out on the night, but two big fights just got announced for that card as well. 3 this week. Benoit St. Denis, Dustin Poirier, 299. Robelis de Spain, this guy from Cuba, the Taekwondo Olympic athlete, he's on 299. Michel Pereira, just booked for 299. That's 10 times better than 300. All right? I don't care if there's more title fights on 300. It's 10 times better. I'm just tired of this, man. We need new matchmakers, and we need people that know the sport to be running the show when it comes to this shit, man. Because, you know, these guys at the top think that a shiny belt is going to make us lose our mind. It's not. Like, the championship fights are important. The UFC had 99 cards in between 200 and 300 to make those formal title fights. They're going to have 99 main card pay-per-view opportunities to make those formal title fights. And they're putting the formal fights on this one. Pathetic.